Chapter 71. The Gate of Time. The dark fortress exuded an icy chill, the faint glow of the eternal hourglass in Solian's hand flickering weakly, signaling something amiss. Outside, the wind howled through long hallways covered in ancient runic inscriptions. The gods stood in a circle, their tense gazes fixed on the massive door sealed with a dense black veil. Solian raised the hourglass, his voice deep and solemn. This door leads to the past, where we may find the key to defeating Malgrath. But he has sealed it with darkness. Ignis gripped his flaming sword tightly, the firelight reflecting off the stone walls. We can't waste time. If we break the seal, I'll face whatever lies beyond that door. Thalios, his eyes as deep as the ocean, warned gravely. Time is not something to trifle with. Altering the past could unleash unimaginable consequences. Standing beside Nyxara, Alandra's violet eyes were fixed on the dark seal.
If we do nothing, the present will collapse. This is our only chance.
At Solian's signal, Alandra and Nyxara stepped forward. Alandra placed her hand on the seal. Feeling the dark energy surge like a violent tidal wave, she turned to Nyxara and nodded. Nyxara closed her eyes and raised her hand. The crescent moon on her palm began to glow brightly. Her spell, Lullaby of Illusions, spread across the seal, causing it to waver. Yet the darkness retaliated, releasing grotesque creatures, distorted shadows with razor-sharp claws. "We've got company!" Ignis roared, charging in with his flaming sword. Flames roared as they tore through the horde, but the creatures kept coming. Thalios summoned a torrent of water, drowning most of the enemies, and buying time for Nyxara and Alandra to focus on the seal. "Regroup and protect them!" Auren shouted, the light from his eternal torch enveloping the area and driving back the shadows. After a fierce battle, cracks appeared in the seal, and it began to shatter. A silver light burst from the door, illuminating the chamber. Solian stepped forward, his voice resonating like a bell.
"The timeline is open. This is the only path to find the key to defeating Malgrath."
The gods quickly moved toward the door, but a chilling black wind swept through, causing them to pause. In the distance, Malgrath's figure emerged, his golden eyes glowing ominously in the darkness. "You think you can escape me?" he sneered, raising his hand as darkness surged around him. "Time is under my control. You will never change destiny."
"No one controls the light!"
Auren bellowed, unleashing the spell Summon the Dawn. A brilliant light erupted, temporarily pushing Malgrath back.
"Go through the door now!"
The group passed through the door into blinding light. The space around them shifted, and faint images of the past flickered into view. The door slammed shut behind them, leaving only the distant echo of Malgrath's voice. The gods found themselves standing in a vastly different world, a vibrant past full of life. The lush greenery, radiant sunlight, and melodious birdsong surrounded them. What shocked them most was the presence of other gods, mystical beings long forgotten. This is where it all began," Solian said, his voice calm but full of significance. "We must uncover why the darkness rose, and stop it before it's too late." Alandra suddenly froze, her eyes locking onto a familiar figure, a shadow of her own past. Before she could speak, another voice, deep and commanding, echoed through the forest. "Beings from the future, do you bring hope or destruction?" An ancient entity stepped out from the trees, its eyes glowing like a fusion of sunlight and shadow. The battle was far from over. Creatures of the past rose to test the gods' courage and intellect. Nyxara, ever composed, faced a shadowy version of her younger self. "No one can conquer the darkness within," the voice taunted. Nyxara smiled calmly. "I don't need to conquer it. I accept it, as part of me." Meanwhile, Auren, Thalios, and Alandra worked together to solve an ancient puzzle etched into a stone pedestal. A vital clue to finding the key to sealing Malgrath. Their journey led them to a buried relic, hiding secrets about the key. Yet dangers lurked at every turn, as Malgrath's reach extended even into the past. Greater challenges and deeper secrets awaited them as they ventured forward. Chapter 72. The Forgotten Past. Stepping through the temporal gateway, the gods were engulfed in a haze of soft light. The surrounding space gradually clarified, a vast, verdant land under a crystal-clear sky. At first glance, this world radiated serenity, and endless flower fields swayed gently in the breeze, and mythical creatures frolicked in harmony. Yet, beneath the peace, a heavy energy pressed down on them. Solian furrowed his brow as the sands in his eternal hourglass froze. The flow of time here is entirely different. Everything seems trapped between light and shadow. Is this our past? Nyxara asked cautiously, her pale violet eyes glimmering with unease. Yes, but not the past, you know. A deep voice resonated from afar. Schistus. An ancient figure emerged from the shade of a tree, towering presence with crystalline eyes that radiated light. I am Myron, the keeper of time's memories, the figure said. You have come seeking answers, but do you have the courage to face the truth? Myron led the group to a radiant valley, where colossal stone carvings adorned the landscape. He gestured toward a relief depicting majestic gods standing alongside ferocious demons. In the past, demons were once gods like you, Myron explained, but ambition destroyed them. The lure of power and greed transformed them into creatures of darkness. Auren's glowing eyes narrowed. What can we do to stop it? Sealing them away is the only solution, but it comes at a cost. A god must sacrifice their light to maintain the seal forever, Myron replied, his gaze heavy with sorrow. After Myron vanished, the gods ventured deeper into the valley. A chilling wind swept past, carrying eerie whispers. Now, Nyxara froze, her eyes fixed on a figure before her, a shadowy version of herself, exuding dark ambition. Who are you? Nyxara asked, her voice trembling. The figure smirked. I am you, the darkness you've always avoided. You think you've overcome it, but in truth, you've only hidden it away. A surge of powerful energy rose within Nyxara. I am not you. Darkness cannot control me. No, but it is part of you, the shadow replied, before fading into the air. This encounter forced Nyxara to acknowledge that before she could seal the darkness, she had to confront it within herself. Meanwhile, Elandra and Thalios stumbled upon a buried ancient ruin. Entering its silent chamber, they found walls etched with glowing reliefs. At the center stood a massive stone pedestal bearing a luminous fragment of an artifact. This is part of the sealing artifact, Elandra said, her eyes alight with curiosity. But it seems shrouded in darkness. Thalios raised his trident, summoning a stream of emerald water to cleanse the shadow surrounding the fragment. However, as he touched it, a surge of energy repelled him, nearly knocking them both to the ground. We need the power of light to stabilize it, Elandra said. Auren will know how. When the gods regrouped, Solian shared a grave observation. This world has already been ravaged by darkness. If we fail to create a permanent seal, history will repeat itself. Suddenly, the sky darkened. A powerful wind swept in, carrying shadows from the horizon. Enormous shadow creatures emerged, roaring with frenzy. Malgrath knows our plan! Auren shouted, raising the eternal torch to summon light against the encroaching darkness. The gods fought valiantly against the horde. Ignis charged forward, his flaming sword cutting through creatures with blazing ferocity. Zephyra unleashed her gale of freedom, clearing one side of the battlefield. Thalios summoned waves to shield Elandra as she worked to stabilize the artifact fragment. Though still shaken from her inner trial, Nyxara stood firm. She cast her spell, Lull of Illusions, lulling many shadow creatures into a dazed stupor. Solian, wielding the hourglass, froze time momentarily, allowing the gods to coordinate a powerful counterattack that pushed back the darkness. With the shadows retreating, the gods hurried back to the temporal gate, with the artifact fragment in hand. Solian lifted the hourglass once more, activating the portal to return them to the present. Emerging from the flow of time, they sensed the air had shifted. A powerful darkness loomed. Malgrath knows our plan, Auren said, his eyes blazing with determination. He will not let us succeed. Solian gazed at the horizon, where the shadows gathered into a massive storm. We need a new strategy. Time is running out, and each of us must play a critical role in the fight against the darkness. Ignis gripped his sword tightly, its flames burning brightly. Likely. If this is to be our final battle, I'm ready to face it. Chapter 73. The Divine Strategy. The sky before the gods was pitch black, swirling clouds obscuring all light. The growing storm of darkness loomed ominously. A clear declaration of war from Malgrath. At the center of their temporary base, Solian stood before a mystical floating map, the faint glow from the eternal hourglass in his hand casting a pale light. "I've discovered a way to infiltrate Malgrath's stronghold," Solian announced, his tone firm. "By manipulating the flow of time around his base, I can create a gap in his defenses, allowing us to approach undetected." Ignis frowned, the flames of his sword flickering fiercely.
"Infiltrate? We need to strike directly. Time isn't on our side,"
Zephyra interjected gently.
"If we charge in without a plan, we'll fail. Instead of direct confrontation, we should create a diversion to reduce the pressure on our advance."
Solian nodded, his gaze steady as he addressed his companions.
"Zephyra, Ignis, your mission is to create a storm strong enough to conceal our movements."
Zephyra and Ignis combined their powers. Zephyra summoned fierce winds from all directions, while Ignis unleashed roaring flames, conjuring crimson lightning bolts that pierced the darkened sky. At the storm's core, fiery tornadoes formed, spiraling high into the clouds.
"I didn't think fire and wind worked so well together," Ignis remarked, adjusting his flames as he glanced at Zephyra.
"That's because you never truly listened to my power," Zephyra replied, a fleeting smile gracing her face. As the storm reached its peak, shadow creatures near Malgrath's stronghold were scattered, swept into the fiery maelstrom. Taking advantage of the chaos, the gods advanced undetected toward the outer perimeter of the base. While exploring deeper into the stronghold, Elandra stumbled upon an ancient book in an abandoned chamber. The glowing characters on its cover seemed to resonate with the artifact fragment in her possession. "This book contains sealing spells," she explained, flipping through its ancient pages. "If combined with the fragment, we can create a seal strong enough to suppress minor demons." Nyxara, standing nearby, her violet eyes gleaming with curiosity, added, "But such sealing power will require immense energy. Who will provide it?" Auren stepped forward, the eternal torch's light illuminating the chamber. "I will take responsibility for protecting the fragments and providing the light needed to activate the seal." As the group rested in a nearby abandoned temple, Thalios proposed, "We can't face all the demons at once. We need to divide our forces and confront them individually." Solian nodded in agreement. "There are 7 of us, and 5 major demons. Each team will face one, but we cannot remain separated for too long. If necessary, I can use time manipulation to bring us back together." Ignis laughed heartily, clapping Thalios on the shoulder. "Finally, a plan that makes sense. I'll take Canalis. You'll see just how strong my flames have become." Zephyra smiled. "Then I'll go with you. My winds will make your fire burn even brighter." Quote. The gods decided to test their strategy by ambushing a small group of shadow creatures near the stronghold. Elandra stood at the center, using the ancient book to cast a seal. Auren and Nyxara defended her, while Thalios and Solara held back the advancing creatures. "Hold your positions!" Auren commanded, the light from his torch enveloping the area and repelling waves of attackers. Ignis charged forward, his flaming sword cutting through shadow creatures effortlessly. Zephyra summoned powerful gusts of wind, trapping their foes in a vortex and slowing their advance. When the seal was completed, a radiant light burst forth from the book, reducing all shadow creatures to ashes. The gods stood silently, exchanging satisfied glances as they regrouped. Returning to their base, the gods reviewed their plan. Elandra placed the ancient book on the table, her voice filled with determination. "If we can do this to the greater demons, victory will be ours." Nyxara, standing beside her, her violet eyes reflecting resolve, said, "But we must be cautious, Sam. Malgrath won't stand idly by." Auren stepped forward, his radiance shining brighter than ever. "Prepare yourselves. We will face the darkness with all our strength." Instead, as the gods gathered for the final time before the decisive battle, the atmosphere grew tense. Auren looked at each of his companions, his gaze filled with unwavering trust. Instead, "Whatever happens, remember, light always triumphs over darkness." Chapter 74. The Unity of Spirit. The gods stood before the massive gates of the Temple of Light, a secret sanctuary hidden deep within the eternal mountains. A soft golden glow emanated from the intricately carved stone walls, yet the air was thick with tension. This sacred place, once the epicenter of divine power, was now shrouded in the ominous anticipation of the battles to come. Leading the group, Auren held the eternal torch aloft, its radiant light illuminating the path ahead. "Let's proceed. We must prepare thoroughly for the final battle." Inside, the temple's warm light soothed some of their anxieties. At the center of the main hall, a massive stone altar held shimmering light crystals, their ancient power lying dormant, awaiting
awakening. Solara stepped forward, her eyes filled with gentle determination. "Everyone must fully recover before we face the darkness," she said, summoning a soft green light. Vines sprouted from the ground, wrapping around each god and emanating a healing energy. Ignis, usually fiery and impatient, felt the soothing warmth of Solara's power and smiled. You always know how to calm us, even amidst chaos." Solara nodded and placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "We are a team, and only through unity can we prevail. Don't let your temper cloud your strength." Her words were like a balm, not just for Ignis but for everyone. They exchanged glances, their eyes now filled with resolve. Standing before one of the light crystals, Solian frowned as the hourglass in his hand began to vibrate erratically. "The timeline is beginning to fracture," he said, his voice heavy with danger. "Entities from the past and future are colliding with the present." Alondra stepped forward, worry etched on her face. "What does this mean? Could we be trapped in the chaos?" Solian nodded gravely. "If we cannot stabilize time, the darkness will exploit the chaos to destroy everything." Nyxara placed a firm hand on Solian's shoulder, her voice steady. "We won't let that happen. Time is your domain, and we'll protect you so you can see this through." Alondra, holding the ancient book and relic fragments, was entrusted with a critical mission. Auren stood before her, his gaze unwavering. "Your task is to protect these fragments at all costs. Without them, we cannot seal Malgrath." Alondra bowed, her eyes shining with determination. "I understand. No matter what happens, I won't let them fall into the darkness." Auren placed the eternal torch in the center of the altar and began reinforcing the protective barrier around the gods. "I will create a shield of light. The darkness won't breach it easily." Nyxara and Zephyra stood at the temple's edge, sensing an unusual energy swirling around them. Gentle breezes intertwined with the shadows, forming a delicate harmony. "Perhaps light and darkness are not true opposites," Nyxara mused thoughtfully. "They may balance one another, like the wind embracing all things." Zephyra smiled, her eyes sparkling. "We can use this balance to create a new power, something Malgrath won't expect." Together, they performed a small ritual, combining their powers. Streams of light and shadow danced on the wind, forming a sphere of energy that hovered in mid-air, brimming with untapped potential. They exchanged a look, realizing this newfound harmony could become a decisive weapon in the final battle. When the gods reconvened at the altar, a quiet stillness filled the temple. Each carried their own responsibilities, but their shared determination shone brighter than ever. Solian, his expression serious yet hopeful, spoke. "We have our plan, and everyone knows their role, but remember, the darkness will try to divide us. Don't let anything shake our unity." Auren stepped forward, the light surrounding him illuminating every corner of the temple. "No matter what happens, we fight as one. Light will always prevail over darkness." The gods nodded in unison, their eyes burning with resolve. Auren's words became their collective vow. Not just for themselves, but for the hope of the entire world. From the Temple of Light, the gods stepped into the open, their gazes fixed on the horizon, where the darkness gathered ever thicker. The flames of Ignis's sword flickered, merging with the strong winds summoned by Zephyra. Auren raised the eternal torch high, its light blazing brilliantly to lead the way forward. "It's time to march into the heart of darkness," he declared, his voice ringing with unyielding authority. Chapter 75. Into the Heart of Darkness. On the horizon, swirling darkness formed an impenetrable barrier blocking all light. The gods moved cautiously along winding paths, cold winds carrying eerie whispers that chilled their resolve. Auren raised the eternal torch high, its light piercing the oppressive gloom and illuminating their steps. "This is no ordinary darkness," Auren said gravely. "Now, Malgrath has created a barrier to weaken my light." Nyxara stepped forward, her hand emitting a faint purple mist. "I'll find a way to weaken this barrier, but it won't be easy." As Nyxara began channeling her power, the ground trembled. From the shadows emerged monstrous figures with grotesque forms, their glowing red eyes and fragmented, shadowy bodies exuding malice. Ignis charged forward, his flaming sword ablaze. He unleashed a powerful strike, creating a fiery arc that cut through the creatures. Yet, they regenerated almost instantly. "This isn't working," Thalios said, raising his trident. "Let me try with the power of the sea." A massive wave surged forward, crashing into the shadowy horde and momentarily weakening them. However, their sheer numbers made it difficult for the group to advance. From above, Zephyra hovered, her delicate wings shimmering. "Let the wind lead the way!" She summoned a powerful whirlwind, corralling the creatures into one area and clearing a path for the group. As they approached the entrance to Malgrath's stronghold, they encountered a colossal stone wall etched with ancient runes. At its center was a faintly glowing crystal, alive. Alondra stepped forward, her gaze fixed on the inscriptions. "It's a riddle," she said. "If we don't solve it, we'll be trapped here forever." Solian lifted the eternal hourglass, its light reflecting off the runes, subtly hinting at the solution. "Be careful. Time is unstable here. A single mistake could eject us from the timeline." After intense focus, Alondra spoke the answer aloud in an ancient tongue. The wall trembled and parted, revealing a path descending into the depths of the earth. The gods had barely crossed the threshold when a frigid wind swept through, plunging them into darkness. From the shadows emerged Umbra, his form constantly shifting and radiating terror. "Do you think you can defeat the darkness?" Umbra's cold voice echoed. "Here, I am strongest, Herod. Embrace despair." He summoned a shadowy army to attack the group. The battlefield erupted into chaos as Auren tried to repel the darkness with his light, only for Umbra to relentlessly weaken his power. "I'll deal with him!" Nyxara shouted, casting lull of illusions. A veil of purple mist engulfed Umbra, creating an opening for Zephyra and Ignis to strike. Zephyra unleashed a powerful windstorm, ensnaring Umbra, while Ignis charged forward, his flaming sword slashing through the shadows. Umbra roared in pain but refused to fall. United, the gods pushed forward, each using their unique abilities to carve a path through the relentless onslaught. Thalios summoned a flood to sweep away the remaining shadow creatures, while Alondra activated an ancient tome, conjuring a protective barrier for the group. "We're almost there!" Auren shouted, the light from his torch growing brighter than ever. "We must hurry before he regains his strength." At last, they arrived at a massive door crackling with black lightning. Solian raised the hourglass, momentarily halting time. The door groaned open, revealing a vast chamber where Malgrath awaited. The light from Auren's torch illuminated the room, revealing Malgrath seated upon a throne encircled by eerie, glowing gemstones. His golden eyes gleamed with malevolent intent. "So, you've finally arrived," Malgrath said, his voice as cold as the shadows surrounding him. "I've been waiting for this moment. But none of you will leave this place alive." The gods readied themselves, their eyes filled with determination, as darkness once again enveloped the room. Chapter 76. The Eternal Night of Destruction. Darkness poured from Malgrath's body, like endless waves engulfing the space around him. Rising from his throne, his golden eyes glinted with an icy, menacing glow. The jewels embedded in the throne flared with an eerie, malevolent energy. "Do you truly believe you can stop me?" Malgrath sneered, his voice resonating as if from the void. "I am not merely a demon, but the embodiment of greed, destruction, and darkness united." Raising his hand, colossal pillars of darkness erupted from the ground, morphing into tentacles that wove into an impenetrable network. The light from Auren's eternal torch dimmed under the oppressive force of Malgrath's power. Auren, his eyes blazing with determination, stepped forward. "You cannot extinguish the light." He raised the eternal torch high, and its radiance pushed back the surrounding darkness. Ignis charged in next, his flaming sword blazing fiercely. "Let the fire consume you!" He swung his blade, unleashing a searing arc of flame. But the fire was absorbed by the shadowy shield encasing Malgrath, leaving only faint sparks. Zephyra conjured a powerful whirlwind, attempting to breach Malgrath's defenses, but the darkness solidified into a barrier that repelled her winds. "We need a new plan!" Thalios shouted, summoning a torrent of emerald water from his trident. The wave surged toward Malgrath only to dissipate against his impenetrable shield. "You are mere children, playing with forces beyond your comprehension," Malgrath mocked, unleashing a wave of darkness that swept the group back. At the rear, Solian focused intently on his task. Gripping the eternal hourglass, he manipulated the flow of time, slowing Malgrath's attacks. The shadowy tentacles wavered and moved sluggishly. "I can't hold this for long," Solian shouted, sweat beading on his brow. "Make use of this chance!" Nyxara immediately cast the Lullaby of Illusions, summoning a thick purple mist to obscure the group from Malgrath's sight. "Well done, Nyxara!" Auren exclaimed, his eyes lighting up. "Now we can prepare for a surprise attack." Meanwhile, Alondra used the ancient book to analyze Malgrath's energy manipulation. Observing the gemstones on his throne, She noticed their glow dimmed slightly with each of his attacks. "The throne is his weakness," she whispered. "If we destroy it, he'll lose the power to sustain his spells." Elandra approached Auren and Nyxara, sharing her findings. "We must concentrate our efforts on the throne. But its shield is too strong. We'll need to combine our powers to break through."
Ignis and Zephyra led the charge to shatter the shield. Ignis drew upon the volcanic power within him, unleashing an explosive inferno. "Firestorm!" he roared, sending a fiery vortex toward the throne. Zephyra followed immediately, casting Tempest of Freedom, intensifying the assault with violent winds. Fire and wind merged into a ferocious force that shook the shadowy shield. Auren stepped forward, his light radiating throughout the battlefield. "I'll reinforce it with light!" He raised the eternal torch, its brilliance intertwining with the fire and wind to create a massive column of light that shattered the dark barrier. The gemstones on Malgrath's throne cracked and began to crumble, their power waning. Malgrath roared in fury, reaching toward his throne and summoning a radiant black gem. The gem pulsed with waves of dark energy, shaking the entire stronghold. Cracks spread across the stone walls, and the ground quaked violently. "This is my weapon of annihilation!" Malgrath bellowed, hurling beams of dark energy toward the gods. Solian strained to slow the gem's energy with his time magic, but its overwhelming power began to break through. "I can't hold it much longer!" he cried. Olkims. Auren used the torch's light to shield the group, but the protective glow began to fade. "We can't get close to him while that gem is active!" The battle dragged on in a tense stalemate. Every time the gods tried to advance, the gem's energy forced them back. Their attacks seemed insufficient to destroy it. Malgrath stood amidst the crumbling space, his cold laughter echoing. "You cannot defeat me. This is only the beginning of destruction." The gods retreated, exhausted and battered. Auren glanced at his companions, his expression a mix of worry and resolve. "We need a new plan. We can't let him continue like this." Solara stepped forward, her eyes filled with determination. "That gem's energy is akin to the power of nature. I can use the breath of the forest to neutralize it, but it will consume all of my divine energy." Her words brought a heavy silence. The group understood her sacrifice could be the key to victory, but the cost was unbearable. Auren placed a hand on her shoulder, his gaze full of understanding. "We'll protect you at all costs," he said. "If this is the only way, you won't face it alone." The gods prepared for the next phase of their battle, their hearts steeled with resolve but heavy with the weight of the impending sacrifice. Chapter 77. The Ancient Sacrificial Ritual. The chamber was filled with the eerie glow of Malgrath's black gem. The air trembled as waves of powerful energy radiated outward, forcing the gods to step back. Solara stepped forward, her gaze unwavering despite the weight of her words. "The breath of the forest is the only way to neutralize this gem," she said, her voice carrying the whispers of nature. "But it will cost me all my divine power." Auren placed a steadying hand on her shoulder, offering silent support. "We will protect you. Your sacrifice will not be in vain." Nyxara narrowed her eyes, her expression cold yet resolute. "If Solara is to do this, we must ensure she has the time she needs." While Solara prepared for the ritual, Solian pored over the ancient book Elandra had brought. The glowing runes seemed to whisper secrets only he could decipher. "Here it is," Solian exclaimed. "An eternal sealing spell can be activated by merging the energies of nature and time." Elandra glanced at Solian, her expression a mix of worry and hope. "If we can cast this spell, it won't just seal the gem, it might also weaken Malgrath." "Good. But we need flawless coordination," Solian replied, his gaze shifting to the group. As Solara began her incantation, the atmosphere shifted. From the distance, a deafening roar announced the arrival of Kaelis, the black flame demon. Kaelis entered, his enormous frame engulfed in deadly black fire. He charged toward Solara, but Ignis intercepted him. "You will not harm her!" Ignis roared, his fiery sword burning brighter than ever. The battle between Ignis and Kaelis erupted. Red flames clashed with black, creating waves of searing heat that shook the room. Zephyra supported Ignis with powerful gusts of wind, weakening Kaelis's fiery attacks. "Focus on his weak spot, the lava armor," she shouted, unleashing a whirlwind aimed at Kaelis's vulnerable points. Standing at the center of the chamber, Solara raised her hands, her body glowing with a soft green light. "Oh, endless forest,
"Grant me your final strength," she whispered. The room transformed. Green vines sprouted from the ground, wrapping around the black gem. Slowly, the light from the gem dimmed as the vines absorbed its power. But Solara's strength waned with each passing moment. Her body grew translucent, and her eyes shone with exhaustion. "Hold on, Solara! We believe in you!" Auren shouted, the light from his torch shielding her from the gem's dark energy. Nyxara and Alandra stood on either side of Solara, using their powers to protect the ritual. Nyxara conjured a shroud of violet smoke, concealing the group from Malgrath's attacks, while Alandra amplified the spell with the ancient book's magic. "Combine light and darkness," Alandra urged, unleashing a beam of radiant light. Nyxara softened the intensity with her shadows, merging the two energies into a harmonious shield that safeguarded Solara. As Solara completed the ritual, the black gem shattered with a deafening crack, its dark energy dissipating into nothingness. The chamber fell silent as Solara collapsed, her body fading as though merging with nature itself. "No!" Ignis cried, rushing to her side. "You can't leave us!" Solara smiled faintly. "Don't grieve, Ignis. This was my purpose. Continue the journey for all of us." Auren bowed his head, his light enveloping Solara in a final tribute. "Your sacrifice will not be forgotten." Despite their loss, the gods pressed on. The path ahead was shrouded in darkness, but the eternal torch in Auren's hand lit their way. "We have no time to lose," Solian said, his voice steady but grave. "Malgrath is waiting." Nyxara led the way, using her shadows to detect and disarm traps. "Don't let grief hold us back. Solara's sacrifice was so we could move forward." Alandra, clutching the ancient book, whispered a quiet prayer. "May the strength of nature guide us." As the gods approached the fortress's core, the air grew heavy with an oppressive energy. The faint light from Auren's torch illuminated walls inscribed with ancient runes. In the suffocating darkness, Auren felt the presence of a powerful light. "That is our final hope," he said, his eyes burning with determination. "But we must overcome all of Malgrath's traps to reach it." The gods clasped hands, their combined light and shadow guiding their path. The final battle was near, and they knew the sacrifices were far from over. Chapter 78. Light within darkness. The gods tread carefully along a dark, suffocating corridor where cold air wrapped around every corner. Ancient runes etched into the walls glimmered faintly, as though whispering forgotten tales. Auren paused, his gaze fixed ahead. "I can sense a powerful light. It's close." "So Algar." Solian nodded, gripping the eternal hourglass. "We must proceed with caution. Malgrath won't let us reach it easily." Now, Nyxara took the lead, her hands exuding a veil of purple smoke that concealed their presence. "Stay close to me. The traps here are unpredictable." Every step felt like a trial. Suddenly, black spears shot out from the walls, but Nyxara quickly conjured a misty barrier to deflect them. Ignis swung his flaming sword, incinerating shadowy chains slithering up from the floor. "The deeper we go, the more complex these traps become," Zephyra said, summoning a whirlwind to disperse the poisonous mist leaking from a crack in the wall. Alandra observed the surroundings closely, her fingers tracing the inscriptions on the walls. "There's something familiar about these symbols," she murmured. "They might hold the key." Thanks to Alandra's careful interpretation, the gods navigated the intricate traps one by one, drawing ever closer to the stronghold's core. Reaching a vast chamber, the group found a massive stone pedestal at its center. Atop it rested an ancient torch, its light radiant yet gentle, burning with a flame of hope. Auren stepped forward, his eyes alight with recognition. "This is the ancient torch of light I've heard of. It can seal Malgrath's power." Alandra approached cautiously, her hands glowing faintly as she examined the artifact. "It holds a purifying force, but it requires someone strong enough to wield it fully." Without hesitation, Auren declared, "I will use it. This is my responsibility." Solian opened an ancient tome, flipping through its weathered pages. His eyes landed on an inscription detailing the activation of the sealing spell. "We need to combine light, shadow, and time to complete this ritual." "But your power is waning," Nyxara said, concern etched on her face. "You can't push yourself any further." "There's no other choice," Solian replied calmly, determination in his voice. "If we fail, everything ends here." The gods divided their roles swiftly. Auren focused on the torch of light, while Nyxara and Alandra merged their powers of shadow and light, to stabilize the energy flow. Solian began chanting, and the flow of time around them seemed to slow. A thunderous roar shook the chamber as Malgrath appeared. His form was cloaked in dense shadow, and his golden eyes burned brighter than ever. "Do you truly believe light and shadow can defeat me?" Malgrath sneered. "I am the embodiment of all darkness in this world." He unleashed a wave of dark energy, crashing into the group. Auren raised the torch of light, forming a protective barrier around his allies, but the sheer force of Malgrath's attack drove them back. The gods stood their ground. Ignis charged forward, his flaming sword blazing with renewed intensity. "I'll weaken him!" he roared, striking with a vortex of fire. But Malgrath absorbed the flames, leaving only faint sparks in their wake. Zephyra joined Ignis, creating a powerful cyclone that engulfed Malgrath. Meanwhile, Nyxara and Alondra seized the opening, channeling beams of light and shadow to weaken the dark armor surrounding him. Despite his exhaustion, Solian maintained the sealing spell. "We need more time! Hold him off just a little longer!" Auren, clutching the torch of light, stepped forward, its glow intensified, standing in stark contrast to Malgrath's shadowy form. "You cannot defeat the light!" Malgrath let out a deafening roar, unleashing a final devastating attack. Darkness erupted from him, spreading across the chamber like a tidal wave. Simultaneously, the torch of light flared brilliantly, sending a colossal beam of light that pierced through the shadows. The gods united their remaining strength, combining their powers into one final surge of energy to counter Malgrath's attack. Light and darkness collided, creating an explosion that shook the entire stronghold. As the dust settled, the chamber was engulfed in radiant light. Malgrath's form was obscured, and the gods exchanged glances, hope mingling with uncertainty about the outcome. As the light faded, it revealed an empty space where Malgrath once stood. Was this a victory, or the prelude to another challenge? Auren gazed into the distance, the torch of light still burning steadily in his grasp, a beacon of hope amidst the infinite shadows. Chapter 79. The Final Choice. The space around them trembled as light and darkness clashed violently in the battle between the gods and Malgrath. Auren stood at the center, the ancient eternal torch in his hand blazing brightly, pushing back the suffocating darkness. The gods spread out, each assuming a critical role. Malgrath, in his ultimate form, towered over them. His body was engulfed by writhing shadows, and his golden eyes burned with fury. "Do you truly believe you can defeat me? Your light is but a fleeting spark against an endless sea of darkness." Auren's voice rang out, unwavering. "We don't fight for ourselves. We fight for the hope of this world. You will never triumph over the light and our unity." Solian stood at the edge of the battle, the eternal hourglass in his hand emitting a faint glow. He could feel the timeline fracturing under the destructive power of Malgrath. Flipping through the ancient book, he found the final sealing incantation, but its cost was his own life. "But this spell requires an immense source of energy," Solian said, his voice resolute. "I will be the one to provide it." Alondra turned to him, tears welling in her eyes. "No, Solian, there has to be another way. You can't sacrifice yourself." Solian smiled softly, his gaze gentle yet firm. "Everything has a price, Alondra. Without me, this spell cannot be completed. This is my duty, and I am ready to fulfill it." Realizing time was running out, Auren raised the eternal torch, its light spreading throughout the chamber and pushing back part of the darkness. "Everyone, attack! We must give it everything we've got before it's too late." Ignis charged forward with his flaming sword, the fire blazing more fiercely than ever. He aimed directly at the shadowy armor surrounding Malgrath, trying to break through. Zephyra summoned a powerful whirlwind from behind, weakening Malgrath's shadowy minions. "I'll hold them back." "Keep going, Ignis." Alondra wielded the ancient light, creating a purifying beam that struck Malgrath's body. The light pierced through his dark armor, and he roared in pain. "This cannot be!" Malgrath bellowed, retaliating with a massive wave of dark energy aimed at the gods. Auren quickly conjured a shield of light, protecting everyone. Amid the chaos, Solian stood in the chamber's center, chanting the spell. The eternal hourglass in his hands glowed brilliantly, the sands inside flowing backward as though reversing time. "Time and light, unite to seal this darkness forever!" Solian shouted. Energy surged from him, enveloping the entire room. Realizing Solian's intent, Malgrath launched a frenzied assault toward him, but Ignis and Zephyra worked together to create a wall of fire and wind, blocking his advance. "You won't lay a finger on him!" Ignis roared, unleashing powerful attacks to hold Malgrath back. Elandra stood beside Solian, using the eternal torch to amplify the sealing spell's power. "We're almost there! Keep going!" As Solian completed the incantation, a massive burst of light erupted, flooding the stronghold. The ground shook violently, walls cracked and crumbled, and the shadows were consumed by the overwhelming radiance. Malgrath screamed, his body pierced by the light. "No! This cannot be. I am eternal darkness." Solian, standing at the spell's epicenter, began to fade away. Before vanishing entirely, he turned to the group, his eyes filled with hope. "Continue the fight for peace. Hope is in your hands now." The gods stood in silence as the sealing spell's light faded, leaving behind an eerie stillness. Malgrath was gone, but the gods knew the battle wasn't truly over. They exchanged glances, their expressions a mixture of sorrow for Solian's loss and hope for the future. Auren stepped forward, the eternal torch still burning brightly in his hand. "We've done all we can. Now we wait to see the final outcome." The chamber fell silent, the soft light around them a comforting reminder that hope remained, even after the darkest battles. As the light spread throughout the space, they felt a shift in the air. A fresh breeze swept through, banishing the oppressive weight of darkness. Auren turned to his companions, his voice steady yet filled with determination. "A new era is beginning, but we must ensure that Solian's sacrifice, and that of so many others, was not in vain." In the distance, the dawn broke over the horizon, its golden rays signaling the start of a new day, and perhaps a new age of light and peace. Welcome to Fantasy Realms. Enjoy the story, and thank you for your support. Chapter 80. The Era of Light. The light from the sealing spell spread across the land, banishing the final remnants of darkness. Each ray of light flowed like a refreshing stream, washing over desolate lands and restoring life to areas once shrouded in shadow. Withered ancient trees began to revive, flowers bloomed anew, and the air grew fresh and pure. Standing amidst the fading glow, Auren held the eternal torch. His eyes, bright yet sorrowful, gazed downward. "Solian, your sacrifice has saved this world. We will never forget you." In a quiet corner, Nyxara stood silently, watching Solian's figure dissolve into the light. She whispered, "A god of time who chose to let his own time cease. Truly noble." Exhausted from the battle, the gods emerged from the dark fortress and returned to the surface. The first rays of sunlight pierced through the clouds, as if nature itself welcomed their victory. Each step felt lighter, but tinged with emptiness. Elandra, still holding the ancient book and the eternal torch, spoke slowly. "We've won, but why does the sense of loss feel so heavy?" Ignis, resting his fiery sword on his shoulder, replied with a somber tone, "Because every victory comes at a cost, but we must believe it was worth it." Zephyra stepped forward, her delicate wings glinting under the sunlight. "Look around. The world is healing. That's the answer." Quote, back at the Temple of Light, the gods held a memorial to honor Solian and all those who had sacrificed themselves. The temple took on an even more sacred atmosphere, bathed in the soft glow of the crystals. Auren stood before the altar, placing Solian's hourglass upon it. He turned to the others, his voice heavy with emotion. Solian was not just a friend, but a guiding spirit for us all. He taught us that time is infinite, but it only matters when used to protect what is good. Nyxara, usually stoic, now had tears glistening in her eyes. "He hasn't disappeared. He lives on in every moment we fight to preserve." Elandra stepped forward, placing the eternal torch beside the hourglass. "I promise his sacrifice won't be in vain. From now on, light will be our symbol." A few days later, in the heart of the Temple of Light, a coronation ceremony was held to formally recognize Elandra as the new symbol of hope and light. Mythical creatures from across the realms gathered, from the deep forest beasts to ancient deities, all paying their respects. Auren stepped forward, holding a crown crafted from light crystals. "Elandra, from this day forward, you are not just a warrior, but a guide for the world. You will be the light that illuminates the path for the lost." Elandra bowed her head to accept the crown, its radiant light enveloping her. To this, she turned to the gathered crowd, her voice strong and resolute. "I cannot do this alone. Light does not come from one individual, but from the unity of us all.
Let us build a better future together." In a distant, secluded forest, Solara rested in a state of recovery. Her body was cradled by vibrant green vines, each leaf glowing softly as they infused her with the strength of nature. Mythical creatures, from unicorns to phoenixes, gathered around her, standing watch. One day Solara opened her eyes, feeling new life coursing through her veins. "Nature never abandons me," she whispered, gazing at the crystal-clear streams and rustling trees. "Thank you all. Now I shall continue my mission to protect life." As time passed, the scars of the world healed. Polluted rivers turned pristine, barren fields grew fertile once more, and every living being felt the transformation, not just in the land but in their hearts. The gods, after countless days of struggle, stood atop a high hill, watching the sunrise. Auren raised the eternal torch, his gaze filled with hope. "We've succeeded, but the greater challenge is maintaining this peace." Nyxara, standing beside him, spoke softly. "Darkness may return, but now we know how to face it." Ignis smiled, his fiery sword glowing brightly. "Whatever comes, we'll fight to the end." In the distance, sunlight spread across the land, but a faint, cold breeze whispered through the air, a reminder that peace must always be guarded. Auren turned to his companions, his voice warm and resolute. "Every day is a new battle, but as long as we stand here, this world will not fall." The radiant dawn filled every corner of the land, marking the beginning of an era of light, while also serving as a reminder that the journey to protect the world is never truly over.